Hey folks, welcome to the channel. As you can see, I'm in front of the camera, and that's not something I usually do, but I figured I would try it this video and see how it goes, so you may not see another one. Today I wanted to talk about a few things. First off, I wanted to show a project that I just finished. Didn't really do a build video on it because it was a lot of trial and error on my part. So that one is this Damascus folder. So my first attempt at a folder, hopefully you can see that. It came out pretty good. I was pretty happy with it. It's not perfect. There's some gaps in some of the seams, but it was more getting the mechanics of this correct. And I watched Loz Harrop's videos on making folders, and I'll put those in the description if you're interested in making folders. He'd be one to check out, but this one's super comfy in the hand. This one's got a zebra wood handle, but it's all brass. The blade is actually an off piece of Damascus that I had that my son took and actually made a raindrop pattern in. And we're going to talk about what this was meant for in a little bit. So pretty happy with how that turned out. You might see me doing some more folders in the future. My next topic is really about Damascus. So I've been having a lot of conversations with Bill over at WJBlades Channel. I'll put a link to his channel in the description as well. And he's been having a hard time forge welding 5160, but he's doing it all by hand. And you know, that's impressive to me because I've tried it. I've made a couple by hand, like no press, no power hammer, and that's a lot of work. But regardless, he was having some problems, and we were talking about Damascus and you know, what people do to be successful and what are some of the things you need to do. So that's what I wanted to spend some time on today. I mean, from my perspective, after doing it a couple times, you really need a press or a power hammer. I mean, if you're really going to do a lot of Damascus, like most of the stuff I do is Damascus, and that's what why I got into this, you need a press or a power hammer. And if you're in a home garage with neighbors, you're probably going to want to press. I started with a powder hammer and it was way too loud. But I think the first thing is the selection of steel. And I know Bill's using what he had, and you know, power to him for using what he had and trying to get it done. And he did, and he was successful. For me, you know, I want the least amount of grief to make the Damascus as I can. So what I do is I'm buying, depending on what's available, I will typically buy a 36-inch piece of either 1080, 1095, 1084, you know, but I'll buy as thin as I can get. You know, this is 1/8 inch, and the thinner the better, because of course you want more layers. If you start with thinner steel and you get more layers to begin with, it's much easier to stack those up. The 15N20, and this is going to be the high nickel steel, because the high carbon steel is going to end up being the black portion and the nickel steel will be the silver portion. And that's 15N20 is the actual brand of the model of steel. This is usually bandsaw blade, like that's what this is typically for, which is why it usually comes pretty thin. So I usually double these up. I might start doing single layers, but I usually make my typical billets, 4-inch billets, 11 layers of the carbon, of the high carbon plain steel, and one less layer of the nickel steel. So 11 and then 10 layers of this, because you want, this is 1/8 inch and I want the thicker steel on the outside. But really for Damascus, you know, you need a good forge, you really need a press. So what I thought I would do today after this is take you around and just show you what I'm using to make Damascus, and you know, what I do to be successful. And more I'm leaning towards, once I get the billet done, I'm starting to lean towards less flux, more sacrificial steel. If you watch channels like Kyle Royer, and I know Jason Knight is a big fan of not using flux. it eats away at the bottom of your forge. And I'll show you, I just replaced the inside of my forge for the second time in a year, because it just gets puddles of flux inside, and that stuff is like liquid glass. And it makes a mess, and when you're trying to do things, it gets all over your steel. You'll see it, the steel stick to the press dies when I'm doing that. So it can be a bit of a pain. So I'm gonna try to start using less flux and more welding sacrificial steel on the side of the billets, and so I have a zero oxygen environment. And if you watch my Sand My Karambit build, if you haven't, go check that out. I'll put a link up in the corner here, where I actually weld the edges to ensure I have zero oxygen, and I have zero problems forge welding that. So let's go around. I'm gonna take the camera, I'm gonna show you what I'm using, and you know, you'll see what I do to make Damascus. So one of the first things I built, you know, learning this craft, the first thing I did was teach myself how to weld. And if you don't know how to weld, watch some welding videos, because you're going to need to know how to do that. And I'm simply doing stick welding and sticking with that. If you got a MIG welder or a TIG welder, you're way ahead of the game. So the first thing I built was this forge. And this is built from a air compressor tank. I think you can get them, I just priced them, I think you can get them for 45 bucks online, brand new, if you can't find a used one. You just take an angle grinder, cut the end off here, you keep this. I wanted to be able to have a bigger hole here, so that's why I put this door on here. You buy some kale wool, which is like a kind of like a insulating, looks like cotton. And then you do all the way around, and then you just put this refractory cement, and you want to keep it kind of wet all around just to coat that, and then you can start putting it on thicker. And I have some of these fire bricks. I have a thin fire brick in here just to keep the bottom flat. So that's what I did for a forge. As far as burners, the first one I had, that's what this hole was. I actually had a single burner in here, and then I decided it was a homemade burner, and there's lots of videos. I'm not going to show you. There's lots of videos on building burners if you really want to do it yourself. Honestly, it's not going to save you that much money, but if you're interested in doing it, go for it. I did. It's easy. I ended up buying these guys here, which it's got a vent here. You can just move this up and down and control the airflow. Okay, and then there's two of them. You can see the first time I did it, I put them too far apart, so I had to put them here. And you kind of want them at an angle anyway, so it swirls on the inside. If you're curious why these were not in the forge, I actually take them out of the forge, because these things, the heat will actually travel up here, and it will actually melt the hoses. It happened to me once, and that's why I've got insulated hoses. But when I'm done a forging session, I'll actually pull them off and put them in these holders here, just so I don't transfer any heat back here. So that's a forge, really simple setup. You got to make sure you got a high pressure reg here. This one goes up to 30 PSI, so you really need the heat, and you want a lot of insulation. When you're doing Damascus especially, you want to block up these holes. So when this is all blocked up, okay, I usually have that sitting there as a bench, and then I'll use a brick and I'll totally block up the forge, and I've got one blocking this side, because you really want to keep that heat inside. All right, next up, the press. So for me, this is the workhorse, okay? I got this design from Loz Harrop's channel. Again, I'll put a link down in the video. Mine is almost identical to his, and he gave me a shout out in one of his videos for building the exact same one. Basically, if you can weld, you can build this. I built it with zero welding capability.
or like not knowing anything before I built this myself. No welding classes or anything. It's basically an I-beam. You just weld the head on it, so or not the head, but you're welding the top piece on it, and down here you're welding that bottom piece. So it's just a big square, okay? You buy a cylinder. This cylinder is a 30-ton cylinder, okay? And then you got to build this head, and if you see it, it's just clamped around. This part moves, and just with these big angle brackets, it's bolted in and bolted around the I-beam. And then these dies just come out, and you can see I've just got 1/2 inch to hold the dies. Same with the top one. So it's a really simple design. And then down here, okay, back there, I'm not sure you can see it. This is where your pump and your your switch is for this, and I built it into a little foot pedal so I could go up and down. Make sure when you buy one of these, you got one that springs to the center so that it stops. You don't want a log splitter one. The log splitters have a detent that when it's in the middle position, it's going, because they're always moving towards the log. You don't want that. You'll need a different valve here, a different switch for it. But I think I built this whole thing, all the steel, everything. The cylinder I think I got for, I think it was $250. So I probably built the whole thing for about $600 or $700. Not even, probably $500. And then you had to buy the pump. It's the motor. It's a 1-horse motor. You don't need a VFD or anything with this. It goes full blast. You need a reservoir. And then I got a guy just to come and do the hoses and all the hydraulic connections for me. I think that cost me $300. So total, I'm probably $1,200 or $1,300 into this press, but this does everything. Everything. This is the workhorse. I couldn't do anything that I do without this thing. So this is a really vital piece of machinery for me. And lastly, before you're going to actually try to build a blade, this is one you're going to want to make. In fact, I built this before I built the press. It was the very first thing after the forge that I built is this 2x72. Okay, I built it with a single phase motor. Not even 3 months later, I replaced it with this one with a VFD. So I highly recommend you replace it with a VFD, or you put in a 3-phase motor with a VFD, because you're going to want to be able to slow that belt speed down. But this is a really simple design. It's just a couple steel tubes welded to a bottom. I put in these knobs here. I ended up just buying this piece from Origin Blade Maker, and I just use steel pipe. You build these little pieces and move them down. There's lots of different models and different designs of this.
So I hope that helps you with the Damascus. You'll see me use these things, and I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about my next projects. So what I'm working on right now is a feather Damascus Bowie. And feather Damascus has been kind of a tough one for me. I've tried it once already and ended up not being able to do the actual feather part, just a mistake, and I'll talk about it in this video where I made that mistake. But this time, hopefully it'll work. And that's going to be a takedown Bowie. So pretty advanced build, but super fun one. So I'm looking forward to that. The other project is I alluded to what was this blade meant for, the blade of this. It was actually for a butterfly knife. My son has been bugging me for a long time to make a butterfly knife or a balisong knife, depending on how you want to say it. We made one a long time ago, had aluminum handles, and it was kind of a first try at it. It was really rough, but now we've got some better designs, and that one's going to be interesting. That is one, folks, you do not want to attempt without a mill. So that one's going to be a lot of work on the mill, a lot of really precise milling of the parts. Like some of these handle parts and where the holes are really need to be precise or it doesn't fold up correctly. So this is some of the test pieces that we first did. And you know, there's some of the design. And I'll talk about it when I do that video, the different kinds of balisong knives, but it'll be a fun one to do. But first, the feather bowie, which I'm excited about. So come on along and join us. You know, there's the billet as it is. This is the second restack, or the first restack, however you want to call it, of that billet. So it's going well, and join me for the next video where we're going to see some of that. Thanks, folks.